You got that? Okay. Hey, folks, welcome to another edition of Firing Line Radio Show. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. And as you know, after a month of absences, I am finally back. And I'm very, very glad to be back. And as always, I try and do my best to bring you the best guests. Why? So you're not stuck with me. That's an important thing. If you're going to listen to this show, I want it to be worth your time. And the best way to make that happen is to bring in somebody who is worth your time. This week, folks, I have Ric Prado. Ric Prado, well, I'm going to let him tell you his life story, but just as an overview, is a great American who has been fighting communism for a very long time. I'm going to listen to him and ask him about his ideas of what's going on in the world today, history lesson of what has happened, a lot of on the ground life experiences, and his life story in general. He's also the author of a book called Black Ops: The Life of a CIA Shadow Warrior. RicPrado.com, RICPRADO.com is where you can find the book and more information on that. It is, of course, a New York Times bestseller, and it's even available on Audible, which, as you know, is the only way I can read a book is on Audible. It has improved my books per year readability by listening to them as I'm doing other things. But anyway, folks, let's welcome to the show Ric Prado. Ric, how are you doing today?
Doing great, buddy. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for your service, and thank you for sharing your life with us with your book. And, Black Ops: The Life of a CIA Shadow Warrior. As I said before, folks, it is a very good read or listen, however you like to get that. Ric, for those who are not familiar with you yet, let's give them a little bit of your background, your growing up story. I think it is so important that sets the base for your service in America and your feelings about this country. So you want to run us through that real quick?
Yeah, I was born in Cuba, 1951. Revolution was starting to rage around 56, 57. I lived in a small town at the foothills of the mountain range where Che Guevara was supposed to be in. So my town would get hit fairly frequently. And so I literally saw my first firefight and people getting shot at the age of maybe 8 years old.
But wait. Che Guevara was just a poet who rode a motorcycle, right?
Yeah, he was that too. He was also a murdering bastard, but that's a separate topic.
Well, that's an accurate depiction of him. Yeah. So your family had been in this village for many generations, right?
Yeah, that was where pretty much all my family, paternal and maternal, lived within walking distance of my home. It was a big town, but nonetheless, it was a town. And I saw the first person get shot and somebody firing right in front of my face to somebody else when I was 8. But the biggest forging memory of my childhood. I mean, we were a middle class family. I had a horse before I had a bicycle. We had a TV, we had a telephone, so we were solid middle class, and I had a very happy childhood. But when things started to deteriorate, like 6 months later, they confiscated my dad's business. He decided that we were going to leave the country.
Wait. These are communists. Why would they do that?
Exactly.
Yeah, and your father's business was?
He had a small coffee roasting company. He was a real imperialist. He had, I think, 10 people working for him.
Yeah. So he had, and your grandfather was a tobacco roller, cigar roller or something, right?
Yeah, my paternal grandfather had a ranch that my dad worked until he got married, and he had a tobacco rolling little factory. My maternal grandfather, who was the coolest guy I knew growing up, besides my dad, was a barber.
So obviously you are the bourgeoisie that needed to be corrected and have all of your assets stolen by the poet warrior Che Guevara. May he burn in hell. So people don't understand that. I mean, here you're living in a village. It's a peaceful life. You talk about it very well in the book, and you just talked about your grandfather. But folks, what's very comforting in this book is is when you listen to Rick talk about his relationship with his parents. I mean, so many times we hear about something happen and tragedy, and these are people who had tragedy imposed upon them, but the family unit was really amazing. And that struck me as an absolute blessing that probably set a foundation for you going forward, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. My dad, who I said, like I said, he was a cowboy. He brought me up that way. How a man's supposed to act. Integrity is what you do when nobody's watching, kind of mentality. And he was very strong about preparing me for life. And when we moved to Havana to try to get out of the country, the first thing that I saw was three guys hanging from trees with signs around their necks that read counter-revolutionaries. So I seen the combat, I seen what they did to my family, the confiscation of their property. My dad had a 57 Pontiac at the time that the police chief wanted, and that big incredible stuff. But now I see three people hanging from trees just because they were against the Castro regime. Even before that, in school, they started inculcating the fact that if anybody in your family speaks ill of Castro or the revolution, it is your duty to report it. And sadly, some kids did.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the communists always say that, well, we're not Nazis. It's like, well, actually you are. You're in the absolute same camp. You did the same tactics. One is a national socialist, one's just socialist with a gun. But you absolutely are the same. You're the same evil, the same ilk, stealing people's livelihoods, imposing your will, ruining their children's lives. And well, in the early 50s, all right, you're middle class. Your dad had a television set and a vehicle, right? Most of America didn't have that. How is Cuba now? I mean, are they still driving around the same 57 Chevy? I mean, have you been
Actually,
back?
it's actually worse than that. I had a not a colleague, it was just an acquaintance that did go to Cuba, and he happened to go through my hometown, and he brought back a whole bunch of photographs. And the thing is, where during my time, you would see Jeeps and you would see trucks. My dad had also a truck and a Jeep and cars. All transportation in that same town is oxen pulled carts.
Hey, it's the best way to improve something is turn it into communism. I mean, you learn that in school. Uh,
Everybody's equally
well, and now
miserable.
wait a minute. Obama opened that up, and there's people going down there telling us how great Cuba is, right? Isn't that? I mean, he wouldn't lie to us, would he?
Of course not. The politicians never lie to us, but the real story is the Cubans always outsmart anybody who's naive enough to go out there and believe their story. The areas that they take you, the areas you're allowed to go to, are areas that are not only the nicer, still second world at best. It's actually fourth world overall, but in the areas that they take you, it's still second world. But what people don't understand is the average Cuban doesn't have access to those places.
No. Well, they did the
The
same
same
thing in
guy
the
who's driving
30s.
your taxi cannot go to the same restaurant that he's taking you to.
Exactly, and in the 30s, Russia did that with some of the New York Times writers. They were telling about how wonderful communism is. These wonderful cities, everything's perfect. Everybody has a smile. There's a big black mouse with big ears running the place. It was a typical Disneyland scenario when in the truth, you had the gulags, you had the Ukraine starvation, you had millions upon millions of people dying to this absolutely horrible and evil doctrine of communism and socialism and humanism in general. So no, we might agree on that, Rick. I think we might have something in common,
Sounds
maybe.
like sounds like we do.
So when did you leave Cuba?
Well, because of my dad's, some of his properties were being just, fought over. They couldn't get out. They wouldn't give them the exit permit. We had visa. Visa wasn't a difficult thing to get back then. So I came out I came out by myself at the age of 10 through a program called Pedro Pan Peter Pan, which was established by the Catholic Church. And so April of 62, I boarded a plane by myself to Miami. And then from there, 2 weeks later, to an orphanage in Pueblo, Colorado. That was my beginning of of America.
And in the 62, there was nothing in Pueblo, Colorado. So you went from a wonderful, lush, tropical thing to the high plains desert, scrub. Folks, my guest here is Ric Prado. Ric Prado is the author of Black Ops. We just kind of gave a rough, 10-minute history of his background in Cuba, growing up as a kid with a great middle-class family. His book is Black Ops, The Life of a CIA Shadow Warrior. You can find it at ricprado.com. We're going to get into now his story. We given us a little bit of the background and his beginning, seeing the evils of communism. He's come to America as an orphan because his parents are still stuck in Cuba under that wonderful hairy bugger called Castro. We'll find out more about that and how he got involved in the United States fighting communism the rest of his life. We'll be right back after this with Ric Prado. That's session one.
Great. Fun.
Well, fun is the guest, right? Sometimes I have somebody on and say, so what happened? Yep. Nope. It's like, come on, guys, this is radio. We gotta work with me a little bit here. Words matter, right?
Absolutely.
So just like you're writing, right? Just like you're writing, fill in the blanks. Okay, ready for the second session? Hey, folks, welcome back to Firing Line Radio Show. Philip Naiman here. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are. And if you're listening to this show, I know it's made your day better, because I have Ric Prado, author of Black Ops, CIA warrior against communism. If you missed our first session and you're just tuning in now, go to firinglineradio.com, get the podcast. You're going to want to listen to this. We're going to talk about this man's lifetime fight against communism, supporting the United States and making your life better in all ways. Ric, as we just said there, you grew up in Cuba. Castro destroyed the place. Family had to flee. You were sent off ahead of yourself as an orphan in Pueblo, Colorado. Eventually, your family was able to join you, or you were able to join your family, and back in Miami, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. My parents came out a little over 8 months after. So I did I turned 11 actually at the orphanage. And there were several advantages of having been in the orphanage. For one thing, I learned to take care of myself pretty quickly, because you have 4 or 5 different cultures with 2 or 3 different languages and a bunch of pissed off kids, because nobody likes being an orphan. But the other thing was full immersion in English. C-Spot run books were my best friend for those 8 months, and it really helped me tremendously. And it helped my parents, because now when I got back to Miami, I could at least ask for directions or something like that. But
And so your family came in, right? Legally, they had to get permits to leave the country. They were accepted in America, starting off and having to start all over again. And your family, and again, read the book, folks. Black Ops, get more detail on that, but it's an American story, and it's wonderful. Let me jump forward here, because there's so much of your life. We have 1 hour to share here today. Let's just jump forward to you're deciding to get into the service.
Yeah, I very early on, and I think that it was my dad had so much to do with it. But my dad, I think he'd been in this country maybe a year and a half when he decided, we're not leaving. We're not ever going back to Cuba, no matter what happens. This is freedom. This is where we're staying. And we became residents in record time. We became citizens in record time. And it was my first year of college, Miami-Dade Junior College. I was studying to be a marine science technician. And there was a small episode there. I was kind of a little bit of a troublemaker in high school, got good grades, but I was always getting in fights. And
I think that might be a little bit in your personality, a little bit there.
That's what my wife says, yes. Frequently, yeah. But so the hippies announced that they were going to take down the American flag and burn it. And I wasn't going to allow that. So I called some of my homies from high school, and about 15 hippies showed up. There was only 4 or 5 of us. And needless to say, we kicked the crap out of them, and that flag never went down. But here's the moral of the story. I remember looking up at that American flag in an azure blue sky, and it was the first time in my life that I was proud of having done violence. 6 months later, I was in pararescue.
and we'll go from there. So you did your stint in pararescue. Well, for those who don't know what pararescue is, it's the special forces of the Air Force, right?
One of two, yeah. Combat controllers is our sister service, yeah.
And on that particular time frame, someone says, "Well, wait, you were in the Air Force during Vietnam." No, you were a well. You tell the story.
Well, we have everybody jokes about the Air Force, and some of them are well deserved. So we always say the pararescue is the men's department of the Air Force. So that's what we call it. But yeah, I enlisted. My back then we had a draft. My draft number was astronomically high. I would have never gotten called, but I wanted to go to Vietnam. I wanted to serve. I wanted to serve this country and pay them back for what they had allowed my family to do, which was to begin dreaming the American dream. I mean, we were sub-poverty for the first 2 years that we were in this country.
Yeah.
But my dad never took a welfare check either, so he was very proud of that. So I applied for pararescue. I thought I was a tough kid. I'd been in the martial arts since I was 15 and lifted weights and all this stuff. And boy, it was humbling. After 3 days of puking, I started getting the hang of it. But I made it through. Our pipeline back then was just a little over a year. Included all these sexy, jump school, scuba school, medical school, parachuting, blah, 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 and mountain climbing. And of course, the EMT2 qualifications at the end, which is what defines and differentiates pararescue from a lot of the other soft components. So I did my year plus training, went down to Homestead Air Force Base. You got to understand that, I got my beret, like, I think it was late 72, early 73. By then, Vietnam was shutting down. And so was the government. The agency went through incredible attrition during those years. And so did the military. I mean, people were either pushed out or encouraging to go to reserves or something. So I stayed at Homestead with reserves for 6 years. No, post-training 4 years. And then I went to an Army National Guard unit for about 3 years, 20th Special Forces out of Fort Lauderdale. But, again, I wasn't, I was rappelling, I was jumping, I was doing all this ninja stuff, but for no purpose other than training for training's sake. And I had, a debt of honor that I needed to somehow pay the price rather than, just wearing a cool beret kind of stuff. So I applied to the agency in 74. They said, sorry, we're firing, not hiring. I applied again in 78 or 79. And this time they brought me in on contract. I was riding rescue with Miami Metro-Dade Fire Department. Because as a PJ, of course, I was more than qualified to do the rescue stuff. And I did that for about 6 years. So the agency needed paramilitary medics to accompany their special activities division, especially the ground branch guys, in training and or missions. So they would call me and say, hey, can you do 2 weeks next month? And I was, that's how it started. And when Reagan took over, the magical day that Reagan took over, the very next day.
Was there, this is a history lesson. Was there a difference between before Reagan and after Reagan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't dabble much in politics, but I do love history. And here's the Reader's Digest version of it. We had Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was a very decent man. He was not a corrupt man. He did not have sons stealing billions from other countries. He was a military veteran.
Those were gifts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the agency, if you got a Timex, you had to declare it. So I know how that works. But during Jimmy Carter, we had Afghanistan. Russia invaded Afghanistan. They took our hostages in Iran. He gave away the Panama Canal, and it goes on and on and on and on. And that's a perfect example right there. When Reagan took over, the minute he raised his hand and was sworn in, they released our hostages in Iran. That's a clue, I think, because they knew that there was a new sheriff in town. And I try to explain this to people. The enemies that we fight against, and I fought communism in 5 different incarnations. The enemies that we have are all predators. China has been an imperial power since before Christ. Russians are Vikings and Cossacks. And the Persians, because that's what they were, control most of the world at one time. That is in their DNA. So when you put somebody in front of them, no matter how bright, if they come across as food, they're going to try to eat you.
Well, that's called human nature, and you're absolutely right. The only way to stop aggression is with extreme violence, right? You learn that growing up. The people were picking on you in the orphanage. Somebody had to get a split lip, and then all of a sudden, everybody gets along. You have to have, well, in the 1980s, I remember this. We had these wonderful T-shirts with it was a peace sign with a B-52. It said "Peace through superior firepower." That works, right? That's exactly what works. So you joined the CIA, and because of your Spanish speaking skills, they didn't put you in Russia.
Exactly.
So
actually, I got hired on full time because when Reagan declared war on communism in Latin America, the first place he wanted to go against was the Nicaraguan Sandinistas,
right,
who had taken over the country immediately with all the support from Cuba, of course.
but wait,
And
no, those guys were started off with the wonderful motorcycle poet. I mean, so they were nice people too, weren't they? I mean, they had a few bodegas. They probably had some coffee shops down there. Maybe they smoked a little bit of weed, but you know, they were all kind of this peaceful, loving communist hippies. Isn't that the way it works, Rick?
they were atrocious murderers. It leads into the entree. They called me to be the first guy on the ground for the Contra program, which was the effort to overthrow the Sandinistas. And you know, the one thing that was so rewarding for me, even though I literally lived Monday through Friday in a jungle hammock for 3 years.
Right.
And I never, ever regretted a second of my life. And the biggest part of that was, there was actually two parts. The first part was the people that I was working with.
All right, I'm going to stop
Every
you here. We're
single
going to take a break. We have to wait for the second part. This is getting interesting. Finally, I'm going to shut up and let you talk. We'll be right back, folks, after this. It was only 3 years in the hammock. You're kind of making it sound like something.
Yeah, well, okay. I only got bitten by scorpions once. Then I learned to put my boots inside the jungle hammock.
All right, let's pick this back up here. Hey, folks, welcome back to Firing Line Radio Show. If you've missed any of this show, don't be a ding-a-ling. Get on to firinglineradio.com, download the podcast, go to our YouTube channel and watch it there. You're going to want to see this. And the good part about the YouTube channel is you get to see what we're saying in between the breaks. So sometimes that's the better part of the show. I'm talking with Ric Prado. Ric Prado, CIA, Air Force, American, awesome guy. One day I'm going to have lunch with him. But talking about his life right after the Cold War heated up, when Reagan was president, he decided to declare war on the communist atrocities that were happening in South America. I know a lot of hippies on campus here today are still talking about how, you know, they want to take over a purse, or it's insanity that they are immortalizing this man and his life. But here's somebody who was actually on the ground in that time. You were sent down to Nicaragua, Honduras, fighting the Sandinistas, right? Tell us about that, Rick.
Yeah, the agency at the time, because of the post-Vietnam attrition, did not have a single native Spanish-speaking guy with paramilitary background, and I was blessed with being a PJ. So they called me up. They told me that it was a full-time job. I took it, and a week later, I was in Central America. No training from the agency. My marching orders were, you got a great boss down there, and I did. Colonel Ray was, you know, a legendary CIA guy and Green Beret and World War II vet. And I said, just follow his instructions. And his instructions were, you go to the camps, you document everything that's going there, make them your friend. Whatever they need, you're the one that's going to provide it. So for the first 14 months of those 3 years that I was there, I was the only CIA officer allowed to go to the camps, because the American hand, the US hand, was still hidden. That's why the book is called Black Ops. Black Ops are those operations that the president tells us to do, that where the US hand has to remain, incognito. So but it was great. You talked about the atrocities of the Sandinistas and the romantic um, titles given to some of these bastards. Every single night, I would sit around the campfire with the Contras. And I'm not talking about the leaders. I'm not talking the former lieutenants. I'm talking about the peasantry, which was, of course, the masses of the effort. And every single one of them had a personal story. It wasn't I read Marx. It wasn't I read Lenin or I don't like Castro. It was they raped my daughter. They burnt my church and beat up my priest. They inducted my 15-year-old into service and he got killed. Each one of them had a very, very pure reason for being in some of the most miserable conditions of living that I had seen to date.
And these weren't warriors. These weren't guys who were ex-military. These were the peasants, the people who lived on the ground there.
That is correct.
Kind of like the Revolutionary War, 1775, right? It was the farmers that said, enough of this.
That's right.
Now, why weren't, because these were the poor people, Rick, why weren't they blessed by communism redistributing the wealth in those countries?
Well, it's funny because the only truth
I
about
wish it was
communism, yeah, the only truth about communism is they do make everybody equal, equally miserable, equally pro, except for the leaders. The
Yep.
leaders will be flying planes and eating lobster and champagne while the masses are being used. Show me one single country that has blossomed after being taken over by communism. Venezuela, the richest oil country in this hemisphere. You can't buy toilet paper.
Well, you don't need toilet paper because there's no food there.
There's no food. That's right. That's a good one. That's true. That's true.
Okay, so you were on the back end of this. Again, Black Ops, Black Hand. You're not Black Hand, but Black Ops. You're in the shadows, helping these people fight for their freedom against communists. What did the U.S. think about that? Let's say Congress at the time.
Well, like always, it was split. You had the more conservative forces understanding that we had a major threat in our backyard, being all the communism in Latin America. But of course, politically, it was also football in the sense that there was a lot of people that were defending the Sandinistas because they were freedom fighters. And don't get me wrong, Somoza, who they replaced, was also no different than Ortega.
He was a pig. Yeah, he's a dictator pig.
He was murdering pigs. They stole, both regimes stole millions and millions of dollars, if that sounds familiar. And it just, people have that romantic part of it, and so it became a bone of contention. Now, the one ace that we had in our pocket was that the Contra program was divided in three. You had the white northern Nicaraguans who were mostly led by former Somoza lieutenants. They were all youngs, lieutenants and captains. They were not, the guys who made money out of him. The South, which was the disaffected Sandinistas under Erin Pastora, Comandante Zero, that were working out of the Southern Front, out of Costa Rica and up. But then we had the Mosquito Indians in the West, and they were my favorite. To this day, I'm friends and stay in touch with Stephen Faggett, who was their leader at the time. The beauty about the Mosquitoes is the liberals couldn't touch them because they're Native Americans. They have no political taint. They're looking for independence. That's always been the bone of contention.
They want to
be
the only
that nobody gives it to them, even though people go, well, why not? There's nothing but jungles and swamps out there. He said, yeah, but that's where all the gold mines are in Nicaragua. So the Sandinistas had a harder time arguing, and our liberals they couldn't do it, was to go against. So we showcased that, and to me, they were the best fighter pound by pound that we had in the.
That's what you said, and they were fearless, basically. And some of those, guys, you got to read the book or listen to the book as I did to find out some of these things that these guys pulled off. Because we'll tease it here, but really, you're talking about big brass monkeys running those operations down there, and we'll tease a little bit here, have them buy your book because they should do that anyway. But it's a great story. So you're fighting against that. At this particular time, Washington blows up. right? Somebody says, well, we can't be fighting communism because, we're indoctrinating our college students with communism. Why would we fight communism? And we're going to cut off the funding, right? So here you're finally getting some groundwork, and now the funding gets cut off. And what happens there?
Well, the funding got cut off and turned back on a couple of times during a couple of the administrations, and it was devastating. I mean, these people were now in harm's way, running out of ammunition, medical supplies,
But we
food.
but we learned from that. We didn't redo that with, say, the interpreters in Afghanistan, right? We didn't
Yeah,
do
we
that
did a
with the
little bit.
Yazidis in northern
Slowed that
Iraq.
one up.
We stood by them, right? I mean, we've learned these lessons. We've never repeated this kind of stuff, have we, Rick?
And what's really detrimental, and people don't understand this, is what it does to our intelligence collection. Because when you have a reputation as a country, the CIA gets the blame for everything. People don't understand that the CIA does what the president tells them to do. That's our job.
Or what the president's handlers tell him to do in this current administration.
Exactly. Well, yeah, absolutely. So in those particular cases, we have lost my train of thought. Sorry.
But the funding. So there was a workaround that happened in Iran, or excuse me, I tipped my hand here. Workaround for the Contras at that point in time, right?
Yeah, but it's funny that was definitely not visible to me. First of all, I didn't even have a radio to listen to the news while I was out in the jungle there anyway. But yeah, what happened was when the funding was cut off, Ollie North was a personal friend of mine, a true American hero. He established a system of, hey, we will, we'll trade hostages for weapons, we'll do this for weapons, and we will take that money and use that to supply the Contras, because they were being shut down and they were being murdered. Because by that time we had a couple of really big hits on them. One of them, when we blew up Puerto Cabezas with my Mosquito divers, and so they were reeling. The Sandinistas were reeling. So our guys and gals were making some great progress in country when this thing was shut down. Now they're in the middle of Indian territory, running out of ammo or food and anything else.
Yeah, and your loyalty to the people on the ground. Yeah, you got them into this. You got to get them out. And so, yeah, that's where we all heard the Iran Contra affair, and it just blew up. And Sam Donaldson running his mouth the whole time while people are on the ground fighting communism, running out of bullets. We've made the same mistake, and that's the tragic thing: is the same people are in charge. People who were in charge in Reagan's, are still in Congress today. Joe Brandon. We're not allowed to say the full name on here because it sets off my Tourette's. But Joe Brandon, look what they did in Afghanistan. All those innocent people, and we had to have private contractors get them out. We did a show on that. It's amazing, folks. I want you to encourage you to buy the book. Go to ricprado.com, RICPRADO.com. Get the book, Black Ops: Life of a CIA Shadow Warrior. As you can tell, we're just touching on a few things here. We've got one more segment left, which I'm really looking forward to. And Rick, thank you for your service. We'll be right back after this. I was thinking about this before our show today. We had a president this year whose home was raided for documents that he declassified, right? We had another president who we don't even know how many boxes of documents in Chinese offices, in his garage, wherever else, right? But if you think back a little bit further, somebody else stole some documents. Sandy Berger. Do you remember that name? Went to the National Archives. Huh? Were you still in service at that time? You went to the National Archives.
I left in 2004, so
you were then.
I think it might have been after.
Yeah, so you were in service at that time. So he went into the National Archives and stole records of the Clinton's administration, shoved them in his underwear and his socks, and was caught, and nothing ever happens to this guy, right? He's stealing evidence out that would have implicated the Clintons in one more nefarious activity. Like we need any more on that. And nothing happens to this guy either. It's just, man, it's so maddening for the populace to see violation after violation without any
consequences.
Well, there's consequences, but they're not the right kind.
Exactly.
We're told to love mercy, seek justice, walk humbly with your God, right? That's our job. But the justice has been perverted, and that is something we have really got to take care of. Anyway, that's my take. Okay, this is our last segment. What would you like to go over?
Whatever you read the book, whatever you think that your audience will appreciate. You know your audience better than I will, and thank you.
I don't talk to them. You kidding me?
But you know better what really pushes their buttons, and whatever you want to talk, as long as it's in the book,
We'll bring this around. We'll talk about the Philippines. I mean, I looked up that video you talked about that draw method. Man,
yep,
you can't see that coming.
The sparrows, they were extremely successful.
Yeah. All right, let's go there.
So.
Hey, folks, welcome back to Firing Line Radio Show. Philip Naiman here. Hope you're having a great day. And of course, you're having a great day. You're listening to the show, and you're listening to Ric Prado. Ric Prado, a CIA officer, retired, wrote the book Black Ops. Probably took 4 years to get it cleared. But anyway, wrote the book Black Ops, the life of a CIA shadow warrior. He was involved in South America fighting the communists, involved in other areas of the world also. But in addition to that, he was sent out to the Pacific, right? Some people don't remember this. And again, one of our greatest weaknesses is not understanding history. But we also had to fight a lot of communism in the Philippines. Now, most of the time when we see these communist insurrections start, it's because there's a pig dictator ruining the country. And in this case, we had the Marcos family, which were pigs. Just like we had Ortega in South America, you usually have or the Shah of Iran, you'll have an absolutely horrible person running the show. And then these contingencies start up and they have popular support until they take over, and then they destroy it even worse. So let's talk about the Philippines. You were sent out there. Why?
Well, at that time, the New People's Army, which was communist-backed and terrorist organization, was literally in the streets of Manila. About 6 or 8 months before I got there, a legendary Green Beret by the name of Nick Rowe, he was the military attaché to the embassy there. He was ambushed and assassinated right in Manila by the MPA. They were killing our officers at Subic, our airmen at Clark Air Force Base. And this was rampant. I mean, the crime was rampant. So the program was providing the Filipinos with intelligence, training on how to gather intelligence, equipment, a lot of signals, intercept kind of stuff to try to help them break the communications of the bad guys and be able to more surgically attack them. So again, it was one of these jobs that I truly cherish, because I was usually away from Manila 3 days a week minimum, going to one camp or another, or to one military unit or the other, and it was really hairy times there for any American, but also for a lot of Filipinos that were suffering from this.
Exactly. The population suffers because there's corrupt leadership being replaced by violent leadership. It's not a good mix. Now, we had a giant Air Force base at the time. A lot of guys were stationed out there, Naval and Air Force, in the Philippines, right?
That's correct.
A lot of people.
Navy, and Clark Air Force Base for the Air Force. Yeah.
Now, Jimmy Carter turned that over too, didn't he? Or was that after?
Well, the discussions were, the negotiations were going on to maintaining the bases there, but then Pinatubo, the big volcano, erupted, and that pretty much shut down the bases. Period. Physically, I mean, I went to Clark because we had a warehouse full of gear there that I needed. So I was the first person from the embassy to go to Clark post evacuation and and there was at least a foot of ash all over everything. Any metal building would crumple under the weight. That stuff is like cement with the rain. Mm-hmm. So that became the moot point. The bases were not something that now we're reopening other by necessity because of the Chinese encroachment in the area. There's a couple of efforts being done to reestablish a presence there in the Philippines.
Yeah, it's amazing what happened out there. Now you talk about there's one very harrowing incident where you're coming out of a diner. We'll leave that for the book, but these assassins that were running in the Philippines. This is something that I hadn't seen before. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we almost got killed, me and a couple of my friends, by a team of sparrows. They're called the Sparrows. They're the professional assassins for the New People's Army, and their modus operandi is very telling. They carry a 1911 A1 45 caliber pistol in their waist, no holster, hammer back, safety tape down, and they hold it with their left hand. So their MO is they're walking with a shirt outside, and they have the pistol being held by their left hand. All they do is when they see they pull it up, they shoot, they put it away again, and they walk off. And they were ghosts. They became a myth. People were getting killed in Angeles City, in Olongapo, and nobody would see anything. So yeah, we heard the shots and we saw the guy bleeding. We turned around, there was nobody there. So they were extremely, extremely efficient. And like we discussed earlier, there is a very good YouTube depiction of a sparrow who was captured, and the deal that he cut was he would show their MO, and it's scary. It is scary stuff.
So, action beats reaction, right?
That's what saved us there. If I we and by we I mean there was six of us, only two noticed, me and Davis. We were the last guys coming out of the diner, and these guys were standing there gaggling. They looked at us. The two guys on the outside had their left hands in their pocket. The guy in the middle is just drilling a hole in my brain. I drew my weapon, unbeknownst to me, because with adrenaline, tunnel vision is the first thing that kicks in. Auditory exclusion. I couldn't hear shit. I could only see these guys. And Philip, if I point a gun at you right now, you would chances are you would raise your hands and go like, "Whoa, what's going on?" These guys did not even blink. They just stared at me and went like this, like, "We'll get you next time." And I'm going like, "No, you ain't." I'd turn around. My buddy Davis had also Vietnam vet. He also had drawn his weapon. The other four, the two Filipino officers and our two techs, they never saw it. They never saw that happening. And I use that in a lot of training. I trained at Fort Bragg and also with Camp X for a long time, or SOF. And I always told them, I said, reaction is not your friend. Awareness in avoidance is what's going to, if me and Davis had not noticed those three guys and their MO,
you wouldn't have been a headline. You would have been a subline on page 4. Yeah.
We would not be having this conversation. That's for sure.
And it's just interesting to me that so much has happened. And I think one of the great parts about your book is it's bringing back a lot of the memories. Now you have a few more winters on me. But my early adult life was pretty much when you were operating. So I do remember a lot of the stories and the history that happened there, but so many people have forgotten August 2 years ago, thousands of people falling off of a C-117 as it's taken on, not thousands, but people just left behind. That was just two Augusts ago, right? That was it. You look at what happened in South America. Why did we have Venezuela taken over? Well, because we had corrupt peoples replaced with violent people. Venezuela was a great country. It's Donald Trump has a special word for countries like that. It starts with an S, ends with a hole. And it is. Their people are starving. They're leaving the countries. We've got millions of people crossing our southern border. Millions of people crossing our southern border. Why? Because Mexico is corrupt and communist. All those states down there need an enema. It is amazing to me. They have the natural resources, they have the people, they have the talent, but because they are corrupt and they don't have the correct rule of law, we just see this repeating itself over and over again.
Without a doubt. I mean, that is the best example for anti-communism. Is go and read about any country that has been under communist control, from Poland to Cuba to Venezuela to Nicaragua, Salvador. All these countries that have succumbed or come close to succumbing to communism have actually regressed. I mean, Cuba in 1959, when Castro took over, Cuba had one of the highest literacy rates in Latin America. The Cuban peso was equal to the US dollar. And you know what it is worth now. Cuban peso it's cheaper to buy toilet paper. It's
Use
more
pesos than to buy toilet paper. Yeah.
than to wipe your butt with a local currency. And people are literally starving to death. I have a website that I look at for Cuban news. Crime is rampant.
Yeah.
There was a priest that just got mugged to steal his scooter. Another guy got stabbed and they cut his throat to take his horse and carriage. It's just,
which is the Cuban carjacking, to be fair.
that is exactly what it was.
Folks, I want to thank my special guest, Ric Prado, for his service. Thank you for your service, my friend. Black Ops, The Life of a CIA Shadow Warrior is a great book. It's a great read. It's also a great listen on Audible. RicPrado.com, RICPRADO.com. And if you missed any part of this, go to our YouTube channel, Firing Line Radio Show, or go to our website, firinglineradio.com, for the podcasts. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your time. And God bless you, my friend.
God bless you. Thank you.
Well, that's the show. Anything else you want to chat about?
Well, I mean, what if there's any questions about things that happen in the book, I'll gladly dwell into a little bit more.
I want to know all the stuff you didn't write in the book. We're still recording, by the way.
Yeah. Well, and that is very true. As you saw, there's certain things that were blacked out. I was very pleasantly surprised that they allowed me to talk about the last program that I started post 9/11. I was chief of ops at the Counterterrorism Center when 9/11 happened. And after that, I said, we need to chase these guys in non-war zones. So I literally gave up that job to go. So I put together a very robust program, Intel-based.
We're going to have you back on because we finished halfway through your career. We ran out of time. So
yeah, anytime.
If you'd like to do that again, I'd love to have you back on.
It'll be my pleasure. Yeah, it'll be my pleasure.
All right. You ever come out to California, Arizona? Come see the West, see our cactus?
I do once in a while. Arizona, I haven't been there in a while. I have friends there that keep asking me to come drop by. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, I'd love to meet you.
If you're ever in East Northeast Florida, let me know.
You guys just got 5 inches of rain the other day.
Yeah, just south of us, luckily, because we're fairly far north. We're just below Jacksonville. And we got some serious rain in that whole Orlando, what does it do? I can't remember the name of the city on the coast, but they got flooded pretty nicely.
Yeah. We just flew back in from Italy and just saw that news. But wow, then Italy got hit with floods too. So it's all over, man. Well, thank you, my friend. I will reach out to your guy, and maybe in a month we'll do session 2 and pick it up from there.
And Philip, you could come directly to me. I mean, Joe Giraldi is a super great guy. I love him. He does me right. But now that he actually acts more like a filter, who's seeing, because So feel free to you have my number, you have my email, you have everything else now. Reach VFR Direct, and we'll make it happen again.
Awesome, buddy. Have a great day. God bless you.
And to you. God bless.